over fields of green, remembering the faces, the moments unseen, the hands that built a dynasty, the vision in their eyes, echoes in the auction ball beneath an endless sky. This is the bullvine, turn the volume high, for the icons of the ages that never will die. From the show ring thunder to the quiet strength they knew, hear their stories now, coming right on through.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Bullvine Podcast. I'm your host today, and I've got an incredible story to share with you. One that perfectly captures the magic that can happen when immigrant ambition meets Holstein breeding genius. You know, sometimes the most extraordinary journeys in our industry begin with the simplest conversations. Picture this. It's March 1953. Shadows stretching across the Houck home stable floor as young Dave Houck milks cows. He's chatting with a visiting record of performance inspector who casually mentions, "There's a good one up in Woodville. Highcroft daughter, can't recall the farmer's name." The inspector returns moments later with just one word, Lilico. By midnight that very day, Dave had purchased Bonnie Lonelm Texel High for $875 from Clarence Lilico, a cow who would later produce a white bull calf named Romandale Reflection Marcus, destined to become one of the most influential Holstein sires of the 20th century. What's fascinating is that this pivotal purchase came just months before Houck joined forces with Stephen Roman, a Slovakian immigrant who'd transformed himself from General Motors assembly line worker to mining magnate. Together with Stephen's brother George and Houck's breeding genius, they would build Romandale Farms into a Holstein powerhouse that rewrote industry record books and conquered show rings across North America. Let me tell you about Stephen Boleslav Roman. He stepped onto Canadian soil in June 1937, just a 16-year-old kid with ambition that far outstripped his modest circumstances. Alongside his older brother George, sister-in-law Mary, and nephew Tony, the Romans arrived from Slovakia carrying $2,500 and dreams of opportunity in their new homeland. Their first Canadian home was a small farm on Scugog Island near Port Perry, Ontario, where they engaged in mixed farming. Now, here's what's interesting. The Romans had actually been educated at an agricultural college back in Slovakia and raised in relative luxury on their father's estate. But in Canada, they faced the humbling realities of immigrant life. One contemporary observer put it perfectly. Steve Roman dreamed the classic immigrant dreams. He would make a go of it, he vowed, no matter what. The Romans' neighbors, Russell Carter and his son Alan, became crucial allies. Alan taught Steve English in evening sessions. The Carters drove the Romans when needed, and their wives shared household equipment. I love this telling anecdote about their resourcefulness. George once rented Steve as farm labor to Russell Carter in exchange for the use of a horse. While farming provided a start, Stephen quickly realized it wouldn't satisfy his ambitions. He secured a job at General Motors in Oshawa, working under foreman John Pookie. And let me tell you, Roman displayed the relentless drive that would define his career, taking every overtime shift available, earning promotions and studying English, business, and law in his limited spare time. With carefully saved earnings, Roman began speculating in penny mining stocks. After losing $2,000 in his first venture, a substantial sum for an immigrant laborer, he learned what became his fundamental business lesson. In the mining game, the person who makes the fortune is the one who controls the action. Roman and Pookie formed Concord Mining Syndicate, starting with 19 mineral claims. Roman quit GM to focus entirely on this new endeavor. By 1948, the company controlled properties from Quebec to Alberta. When the Leduc oil discovery created a boom in 1949, Concord acquired claims near major strikes. By 1954, Roman claimed to have made his first $1 million. Think about that transformation, from immigrant teenager to wealthy entrepreneur in less than 2 decades. He was now ready to return to his agricultural roots, not as a struggling farmer, but as the ambitious owner of Romandale Farms. In 1950, Stephen Roman purchased 150 acres north of King Road on Bathurst Street in King, Ontario, marking his official entry into the Holstein business. Though he briefly considered breeding Guernseys, can you imagine? He astutely recognized the ascendancy of Holstein cattle in his region. His early purchases, I have to say, reflected more enthusiasm than expertise. Accompanied by what was described as an unenlightened herdsman, Roman acquired foundation animals from various small herds. From Smith Brothers came Dorothy Lonelm Texel Supreme VG, and from Murray Holtby, Ayton Lodge Gene Rag Apple Echo. At Jack Houck's Houcombe Farm, he purchased Rieco May Burke EX shortly after she completed a 35,003 14-pound Canadian Championship record. With his herd growing rapidly, Roman scheduled his first production sale for March 31, 1953, at Hayes Sales Arena. The event averaged $784.77 per head on 64 animals, the first of 19 Romandale auctions that would systematically raise the bar for Holstein merchandising. But here's where Roman made his most strategic move. He hired Jack Houck's son, Dave, as herd superintendent in June 1953. The Romandale advertisement announcing the hire noted, "It is expected that he will contribute much to the development of our breeding and testing program, for we have long admired Dave's ability to pick the good ones, care for them, test them, and show them." You have to understand that Houck brought an almost spiritual connection to Holstein cattle, and he was just 20 years old. As a boy, he'd missed church services to read the Holstein Journal in the family car. He'd hand-milked Spring Farm Barely to a Canadian record as a teenager and had won the Ontario Junior Dairy Cattle Judging Competition in 1945. After a stint at Hickory Creek Farms under the mentorship of Whitey Thompson, Houck returned to work with his father before Roman's offer came. Jack Houck, recognizing opportunity, encouraged his son to accept Roman's proposition. Romandale, he said, was a big, pushy outfit that was destined to go to the top. And you know what? History would prove him right. Now, let me tell you about something remarkable. Dave Houck arrived at Romandale with 5 cows. These females, all daughters of Lonelm Texel Highcroft, would become the foundation upon which Romandale's breeding empire was built. Their names were Texel Highcroft Calantha, Layla Texel, Texel Francie Wayne, Georgina Texel Peavy, and Bonnie Lonelm Texel High. On paper, they seemed unimpressive. None had production-tested dams. Only 3 had classified dams, all scoring merely good plus. But here's where Dave Houck's genius comes in. These unheralded cows possessed an unmistakable uniformity and quality that caught his practiced eye. A contemporary described them as remarkably uniform in their type pattern, tall, wide-chested cows with clean, broad rumps, beautiful quality of bone, fine textured udders, some long-teated in front, udders carried high and wide in the rear. Full sisters Texel Highcroft Calantha and Layla Texel, both out of Heliana Calantha GP, founded the Calantha family, a tribe which empowered the Romandale herd to move forward. Before their arrival, the Texel strain was merely a strong regional bloodline, popular in and around York County. The Romandale program elevated it to international prominence. But the most consequential of these foundation cows proved to be Bonnie Lonelm Texel High, the one purchased after that fateful conversation with the ROP inspector. She traced directly back to Musette, an 1882 import from Holland who had once been shown by an Amish deacon who was later chastised by his church for exhibiting livestock. Imagine that. As a mature cow, Bonnie stood 62 inches at the withers and many times taped over a ton. Despite her immense power, she maintained a respectable angularity and walked on legs made of clean, flinty bone. Bonnie's show ring career included winning the milking 3-year-old class at the Canadian National Exhibition in 1953. Judge Harvey Swartz, handling her at the Royal Winter Fair the following year, grabbed her rear udder and commented admiringly, "Nice skin." That was high praise back then. From these Highcroft Foundation cows flowed numerous champions, including Texel Fondhope Darky VG, All-Canadian 2-year-old of 1954, Texel Fondhope Sparky VG, All-Canadian 2-year-old of 1956, and Romandale Highcroft Rose EX, Reserve All-American 3-year-old of 1959. Now, if the Highcroft daughters provided the foundation of Romandale's success, their mating to ABC Reflection Sovereign catapulted the herd to greatness. This cross became what many called one of the potent combinations of breed history, a pairing that merged the flash, style, and quality look of the ABC blood with the power, clean bone, and boxcar rumps of the Highcrofts. The results were nothing short of spectacular. 3 of the 4 members of the 1962 All-Canadian get of ABC Reflection Sovereign were out of Highcroft dams, while the 4th was from a Fond Hope daughter of a Highcroft cow. With one substitution, this group was also named the 1962 All-American get of sire and later voted all-time All-American. That's about as good as it gets in the Holstein world. Among the most celebrated progeny from this cross was Romandale Cora EX4, daughter of Texel Highcroft Calantha. Described as possessing Hollywood good looks, Cora became grand champion and best udder at the International Dairy Show in 1962. Later sold for $23,300, she achieved the rare distinction of being nominated All-American while having over 100,000 pounds of milk production. At age 12, she classified EX96 and produced a son named King of the ABCs, who would influence the breed for generations. Another standout was Romandale Reflection Betsy EX, described as one of the prettiest females bred at Romandale. Reserve All-American 3-year-old in 1960 after winning at the International Dairy Show, Betsy continued her show career by winning the Interbreed Best Udder class at the Royal Winter Fair in 1965 at the relatively advanced age for a show cow. But the crowning achievement of the ABC Highcroft Cross, the one I really want to tell you about, was Romandale Reflection Marquise EXST, the son of ABC and Bonnie Lonelm Texel High. This white male monster, as one admirer called him, would transcend even his parents' considerable influence and leave an indelible mark on Holstein breeding worldwide. I wish you could have been there. It's a crisp autumn day in 1962, and the crowd at the National Dairy Cattle Congress in Waterloo, Iowa, falls silent as Judge Spencer Dunham raises his hand to indicate his grand champion bull. The massive white yearling at the end of Dave Houck's lead stands motionless, commanding the ring with his presence. Romandale Reflection Marquis had just defeated America's best bulls on their home turf, cementing the Roman brothers' status as international Holstein powerhouses. Marquis was the embodiment of the Romans' breeding philosophy, the product of one of the breed's infallible crosses, ABC Reflection Sovereign on a Lonelm Texel Highcroft dam. His journey from calf to legendary sire exemplified the Romandale approach to Holstein breeding. Identify exceptional foundation animals, make strategic crosses, and market the results with flair. As Marquis matured, his dominance grew. Partially proven at Hawkhurst, Agro Acres, and Romandale, Marquis topped the 1964 Romandale sale on the $37,000 bid of Curtis Breeding Service, Cary, Illinois, chronicled one industry observer. His progeny soon dominated show rings across the continent. Between 1968 and 1974, Marquis offspring dominated the All-Canadian and All-American contests. Few sires have fathered a longer list of All-Canadian and All-American winners, and few have produced stronger breeding cattle, noted one Holstein historian. Among his most influential daughters were Anzabar Marquis Kizel EX7, All-Canadian 3-year-old in 1971, Neodac Marquis Josephine EX, a member of the 1973 All-Canadian Get, and the remarkable Mellow Breeze cows, Mellow Breeze Marquis Sue EX2 and Mellow Breeze Marquis Arlene EX. The Mellow Breeze sisters came to Romandale through another of Dave Houck's inspired discoveries. While speaking at a breeder's seminar in Maine in 1968, Houck was approached by Vermont dairyman Doug Nelson about 2 Marquis daughters he had spotted. Houck purchased the pair from Robert P. Sherman Jr. of New Haven, Vermont. Despite their undistinguished maternal lines, both were in calf to Don Auger true-type model. In a remarkable coincidence, both delivered excellent daughters Mellow Breeze Flory EX and Mellow Breeze Giselle EX4. These females founded families that would rival the Calanthus in breeding power and consistently produce high-selling, high-performing offspring for 2 decades. While Romandale's Holstein breeding program flourished, Stephen Roman's business empire expanded exponentially. In 1953, he purchased 900,000 shares of North Denison Mines at 8.5 cents each. After renaming it Consolidated Denison Limited, he acquired claims near Quirk Lake that contained the largest body of uranium ore ever discovered. Roman later identified as one of his life's main accomplishments the fact that he raised $59 million to bring the mine into production without losing financial control of the project. Within 4 years, he owned the richest uranium mine in the world, and by the mid-1970s had secured forward orders worth $5 billion. His office reflected his status. Journalist Paul McKay described it as dominated by a massive, dark, antique desk imported from Europe with an intricate pattern of wood inlays and hand-carved gargoyles glaring out from the corners. Behind it stood a wooden bookcase filled with leather-bound books, all of which were kept meticulously free from dust. The room featured burnished oak paneling and a plush blood-red deep-pile carpet. Roman's chair was dark brown leather trimmed in gold. Above the Chesterfield hung a Habsburg-era original painting depicting an antelope being dismembered by a bloodied, snarling bear. Roman's office procedures were equally distinctive. He scheduled important meetings for Friday the 13th, believing it his lucky day. Pregnant secretaries were dismissed when their stomachs began to bulge. Yet, despite his demanding nature, he respected those who stood their ground when a secretary refused his order to run through the office, insisting she would walk briskly. Roman backed down after a moment of stunned silence. Here's something that reveals the man's character. Despite his wealth, Roman often lunched on humble fare, cabbage rolls or wieners and beans smothered with ketchup, which Roman consumed with gusto. Though more elaborate meals were prepared for distinguished guests like American President Richard Nixon. At Romandale Farms, Roman maintained the same involved management style. Not content to sit back and permit his managers to run things, he was never far removed from the heat and the dust. He knew every animal by sight, could recite all pedigrees from memory, and was personally involved in breeding decisions. To him goes the credit for some of the herd's wisest matchups, noted one observer. Stephen Roman believed that through the show ring lay the path to the Holstein mountaintop. By 1959, Romandale had reached the summit, winning premier breeder and exhibitor banners at the International Dairy Show in Chicago. Let me share a story that reveals Roman's competitive spirit. As he accepted congratulations after this triumph, Robert M. Rumler, secretary of the Holstein Association of America, approached. "Well, Steve, you did pretty well," Rumler acknowledged. When Roman thanked him, Rumler added, "You realize, of course, that this is not our most important show." Asked which was the premier event, Rumler replied, "Why the National Dairy Cattle Congress at Waterloo?" Roman took this as a challenge. The following year, Romandale Farms won premier breeder and exhibitor at the National Dairy Cattle Congress and repeated the feat in 1961 and 1962, the first time in history that one herd had taken these banners 3 years in succession. If you know anything about showing cattle, you understand what an extraordinary achievement that was. The Romandale show team became legendary, featuring animals like Romandale Cora EX, Romandale Reflection Betsy EX, and Romandale Highcroft Rose EX. In 1961, these three formed one of the breed's fanciest homebred trios to win Best 3 Females at Waterloo. The impact of Romandale's show ring dominance extended beyond ribbons and banners. It established Canadian Holsteins as world-class, paving the way for an export market that would become a cornerstone of the Canadian dairy industry. In the continuance of a tradition started by Estengo and Tom Hayes, the Romans' annual forays across the border, meeting the Americans on home turf, provided the Canadians with international leadership of flair and style. On this foundation was built the Canadian success in exporting breeding stock around the world. Stephen Roman approached Holstein merchandising with the same innovation he brought to mining ventures. While not the first breeder to use reduction sales as marketing tools, Roman perfected the strategy, eventually holding 18 Romandale auctions, where access to Romandale genetics was available only through these carefully orchestrated events. Roman's tax strategy influenced the timing of these sales. Because of Canada's Income Tax Act, which provided for income averaging over a 5-year period, Roman liked to hold a sale every 5 years. That's smart business, folks. One of his innovations was offering animals in pairs. A number of females, usually 10 or 20 of them, were sold on choice, the highest bidder taking his pick. The remaining animal formed part of a nucleus for a new Romandale herd. These pairs typically included a name recognition female one who had done it all and a younger female of unusual potential. This strategy maximized returns while ensuring Romandale retained quality foundation animals for rebuilding the herd. The results were spectacular. The 9th Romandale sale in 1975, marking the farm's 25th anniversary, featured a bull selling for $72,000 and a female for $31,000. The 149 head averaged $4,358.39, the highest ever made at a Canadian auction of animals from a single herd. But these figures paled beside the 1979 Romandale dispersal, described by Holstein Friesian Journal as fantastic and unparalleled. The auction grossed $2,795,500 on 21 head, averaging $13,907.96, the highest ever made at a North American dispersal, and 3 times better than the previous Canadian high. The sale featured world record prices for ABC Reflection Sovereign offspring. Romandale Pride, a 3-month-old bull calf, sold for $400,000 to Japan Holstein Breeding Services. Romandale Trillium, an 8-month-old heifer, brought $330,000, and Romandale Rose, a 3-month-old heifer calf, fetched $175,000. Even after this dispersal, the Romans assembled another herd and held further sales. Their 1984 dispersal averaged $11,668.85 per head, the highest averaging herd sale ever held in Canada. Featured were 8 progeny of Northcroft Ella Elevation EX97-3E, including Romandale Sterling, who sold for $300,000, and Romandale Valor ET, purchased by Japan Holstein Breeding Service for $200,000. The final chapter came on November 13, 1990, when the 40-year Romandale story concluded with a final dispersal averaging $3,635.90 on 117 head. While Marquise established Romandale's reputation in North America, another bull extended the farm's influence across the Pacific. Romandale Count Kristen EXST, the Citation R, son of Greyview Pet Krista EX, sold to Hokkaido Dairy Agricultural Co-op of Japan for $15,000 in the 7th Romandale sale in 1969. Roman had drawn semen before shipping the bull, making it available to other breeders. Used extensively at Romandale, Count Kristen came up with one of the highest type proofs in Canadian history, even surpassing the record set by ABC Reflection Sovereign EX Extra, his paternal grandsire. His 474 classified daughters rated 92% good plus and better for type, with 33 excellent and 178 very good females. In Japan, Count Kristen's influence was revolutionary. This bull is credited with changing the nature and quality of Japanese Holstein type in a single generation. At the 1983 All Japan show, 3/4 of the exhibited cattle were Count Kristen offspring. His daughters not only looked the part, but shattered several Asian production records. The Japanese commemorated his contribution by constructing a memorial statue in recognition of his contribution to breed progress. His North American daughters included Continental Scarlet Red EX, All-American 3-year-old, Romandale Countess Jewel EX, All-Canadian 4-year-old with multiple superior production records, and Romandale Countess Jan EX, Grand Champion at the CNE in 1981. Behind Romandale's success lay a disciplined breeding philosophy developed through collaboration between the Romans and Dave Houck. Making breeding decisions was more or less a collaborative effort. The loud voices belonged to Steve Roman and Dave Houck. The buzz came from George Roman, seated in the background, who provided wise counsel. The team shared a vision focused on show type, good legs and udders, longevity. While popularity of bloodline was considered, it was not determinative, though matings were never permitted to shift too far from an ABC Reflection Sovereign focus. Their approach to analyzing cattle was methodical. In analyzing a female, they tended to think in terms of sharp fronts or power fronts and their natural accompaniments. They recognized that certain traits came with trade-offs. The powerhouse cow, or the real smooth one, they found, often appears too straight in the leg, but her udder is usually tucked tightly underneath. The loose-jointed, rangy cow, on the other hand, is often loose of her udder attachments. The Romandale breeding philosophy worked toward the middle, trying to reconcile these extremes, moving toward a median point. They discovered that the hardest thing to breed was strength and spring of rib with cleanness of bone. This thoughtful approach, backed by Roman's financial resources and marketing acumen, produced cattle with the consistency of a baker stamping out taste treats with a cookie cutter. A common misconception holds that wealthy hobbyists like Roman operate with unlimited budgets. But that wasn't Roman's way. The weekend farmer usually approaches the cattle business on a no-nonsense basis. The enterprise must stand on its own merits. There is a dollar limit on what will be spent. Many times Dave Houck suggested to Steve Roman that they buy this cow or that, only to be told by Roman that the Romandale cow budget would not allow it. Major purchases like Pet Krista, Crisco X, and Northcroft Ella Elevation came at a time when the farm bank account was bulging, usually after a major Romandale sale. This fiscal discipline extended to breeding decisions. When evaluating potential sires, their first task was to sort out the beast's breeding pattern. They scrutinized his best daughters and his worst, determined his strong points, enumerated the things that the sire could never accomplish in a million years. They used promising bulls sparingly at first, more if the results justified, always exercising the keenest discretion. On September 23, 1989, Stephen Roman died at age 68. In obituaries, the business press remembered him as a business titan. Peter Newman in Maclean's described him as a builder and a risk-taker on a grand scale, while Toronto Sun journalist Diane Francis called him one of Canada's greatest builders. His physical appearance matched his larger-than-life persona, dominating the face of high Slavic cheekbones, a face that frequently broke into a mischievous grin, were two honest eyes that met yours in direct gaze. Though known as a hard-shell capitalist, Roman possessed a philosophical turn of mind and was the deepest of thinkers. He believed a good man's life on earth was a gradual ascension towards enlightenment and godliness, and saw wealth creation as a high calling, an activity perfectly compatible with a religious perception of the universe. The true mourning for Stephen Roman in Holstein circles began on November 13, 1990, when the Romandale herd dispersed. For with the dispersal came the realization that for the first time in 40 years, no more Romandale full-page Holsternal advertisements would appear monthly. No more would Romandale Farms provide the high-powered international leadership. No more would the beautifully scripted Romandale breeding program produce the kind of cattle that made Holstein lovers drool. Today, the Romandale influence continues through countless pedigrees, tracing to Marquis, Count Kristen, and other Romandale sires and cow families. Perhaps more importantly, the Romans set a standard for breeding excellence and promotional savvy that transformed how Holstein cattle are marketed worldwide. As for Bonnie Lonham Texel High, the $875 cow who produced Romandale Reflection Marcus, her purchase illustrates the perfect partnership between Roman's willingness to invest and Houck's eye for quality. It was these complementary talents, along with George Roman's steady counsel, that built a Holstein dynasty still reverberating through the breed decades after the final Romandale cow left the auction ring. The story of Romandale is ultimately one of vision, the immigrant's vision to build a fortune, the breeder's vision to identify genetic combinations that would create superior animals, and the marketer's vision to showcase these achievements to maximum advantage. When you think about it, isn't that what makes our industry so special? It's not just about cows. It's about people with dreams, with vision, with determination. It's about seeing potential where others don't, making connections that others miss. Stephen Roman and Dave Houck exemplified this perfectly, and their legacy lives on in herds across the globe. Thanks for joining me today for this remarkable Holstein story. Until next time, keep dreaming big.
This is the bovine, turn the volume high. For the icons of the ages that never will die. From the show ring thunder to the quiet strength they knew. Hear their stories now, coming right on through. Oh, tell the tale, tell the tale. The Bovine legends live here.